What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 127.
27.
It's Monday, November the 11th, 2024. Josh Callaway, James D. Jackson, Tom Green. It's post-game reaction Monday after just a disaster of a night in Columbia for Oklahoma football. As much of a gut punch of a loss as you could possibly take. Tom and I were there. We're going to talk all about it, as we typically do on these post-game reaction Mondays. Gentlemen, let's dive right in. There's a lot to sift through just in the fourth quarter alone, but the whole game. But let's just start kind of the way that Tom and I did on the instant reaction. What an awful loss. I mean, just so bad. The gutting nature of it. We talked about it going in. You needed that 6th win to get to bowl eligibility. Brady Cook was out. It was going against backup Drew Pine. There's a million wrinkles you could throw at it to make your argument that this is the worst loss of the Brent Venables era, and I won't really fight you on it. This was really, really bad, and I'm still struggling to find the right words because when you think Oklahoma has hit rock bottom and it can't get any worse, they somehow continue to dig deeper. Saturday was horrible, and it's one of those losses that'll sting and stick with this team and program. It feels like for a while.
Yeah, I was thinking about it this morning, and look, this loss is worse than either of the losses last season, without a doubt. But I do think that there are some parallels in going on the road and losing to a backup quarterback who you probably should beat, which is what happened to Oklahoma last year at Kansas. This one, again, much worse. This team we talked about it post-game, and they just can't get out of their own way. 4 turnovers again in this one. 2 killer ones from Jackson Arnold. Obviously, the most consequential being in the final 30 seconds there when he should have thrown the ball away, instead coughed it up, and Zion Young scoops it and scores the game winner for Missouri. But I'm still struggling to kind of figure out how to put it into words. I know players were distraught after the game. Billy Bowman struggled to find the right words. Danny Stutzman was bawling, it looked like, on the sideline as the final seconds ticked off. That's a gut punch of a loss for them. You had an opportunity to become bowl eligible. Again, we discussed it. This was their most manageable game left on the schedule. Playing against a backup quarterback on the road against a Missouri team that has, they've got 7 wins, but they've been very shaky throughout the season. They were just coming off of getting, their doors blown off by Alabama, and you played well enough to win, but just melted down in those final 2 minutes. Like we talked about it in the car. I think Oklahoma's win probability was like 94% after our Mason Thomas's sack inside the final 2 minutes there. And then you give up a 3rd and 16 conversion, game tying touchdown, and then just disaster on the next drive. It's baffling.
Yeah, it was just going into it. We all thought this was like the game that OU was not going to have any excuses in this one. They got the receivers back. Missouri was playing with a backup quarterback and have had some issues of their own. And you go in there and you kind of make the plays that you needed to make, especially when you got up to the final couple of minutes of the fourth quarter. This probably should have been known as like one of Billy Bowman's best games of his career. Like the big hit on 4th down on one of the drives, the scoop and score to what should have been like the play to win the game pretty much. And you just gave it away. Like Missouri gave you the game with the fumble and everything like that. Sammy Amosigo getting that sack and enforcing it. And then you gave it right back. And that's what makes it so much worse, is because that's not what Oklahoma usually does. Like throughout the entirety of Oklahoma Sooners football, giving games away is not the way it goes. And so to see that against a team that the fans and some media members have a really disdain for that program, it makes it worse. It all adds up to that, because there was so many small differences that could have been made that you would have won that game. Jacoby Johnson, if he had not fallen down on the long pass, maybe he makes an interception or just makes a play on that ball. Woody Washington, I looking back on the broadcast, I didn't really see a defensive holding is what, in terms of what the SEC would usually call, because they usually allow you to be more physical in this conference. those type of situations where it was just so small that the entire game changed. Jackson Arnold, you have 30 seconds left. The one thing you cannot do is fumble the football in that scenario, especially at that part of the field. Like, it was like the perfect place for it to be fumbled for Missouri. Like, even if you play for overtime, it's a lot better. But it was shocking. It was shocking, and because of the way it happened, you had Zach Smith hitting like 56 yarders in the first half, which is one of the biggest comeback stories that we've seen here, and it didn't mean anything. It meant nothing because of the way it ended. So, I mean, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I didn't get to talk about it after the game.
You've been sitting on it for 2 days.
Yeah, like it's painful because of the way they lost this game, and because you knew they should have won and they could have won given the plays they had made until the final minute and a half or 2 minutes. It was a loss. It was a loss.
I've never seen a team just beat themselves and continue to make the mistakes at the rate that Oklahoma does. Tom put it perfectly in the instant reaction. They just find ways to lose. It's incredible, truly. And it's been a problem over the last 3 years, frankly. Games right at the end of it, you're sitting there saying, Oklahoma should have won that game. How did they lose that game? Oklahoma was the favorite in this game. You know, Brady Cook was out. Once Brady Cook was reported out from our guys over at Power Mizzou on Friday night, we're all kind of saying Oklahoma needs to win this game tomorrow. Like, it would be bad to lose. That's even before the context of how the game actually played out. Rewatching it this morning, it was unbelievable how inept Missouri's offense was for the vast majority of this game. Couldn't do anything, but Oklahoma didn't take advantage of it. They couldn't finish drives. The offense is just a disaster. We'll get into that more in a second, but it's just this team plays the exact opposite of winning football. And you see little glimmers of it, little flashes of what the team could be and what they're capable of and what Brent Venables is trying to build. That Billy Bowman play, like you referred to, James, was fantastic. And like, you see little breadcrumbs of it, but the mistakes are so glaring, so huge that you just can't overcome them. And especially not in the SEC. So it's hard to believe that this team continues to just trip over themselves like this over and over, with this being the most extreme example, to just get the miracle Auburn style comeback and then to squander it. It was stunning, absolutely stunning. It's 2 days later, and I'm watching it back this morning. It was still like I expected it to be different on the replay for some reason, because it's just crazy. Knowing what was going to happen, it was crazy watching, because it's unbelievable.
Josh, I've never seen it to where Sooner magic happens and you don't win the football game, like at OU. Like, just the fact that Tatum threw a touchdown pass to Jackson Arnold to tie the game up was already crazy enough. Like, you know, Sooner magic is what those things that happen that you just can't explain. And then to get the scoop and score from Billy Bowman, like, when those plays happen, that is just OU usually wins those football games. Like, I it's probably percentage. I bet it's 99% of the time. Like, just those particular plays that happen. Like, it was unfathomable.
Yeah, I was telling Josh, like, the game was, I mean, it was a game for, 3.5 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so in the press box, they hold the elevators at 5 minutes left so the coaches can go down at the end of the game. So me and a couple other people hopped in the elevator at like 5:30 left on the clock to make our way down to the field. I'm walking down the steps toward the field as that Taylor Tatum touchdown pass to Jackson Arnold goes on. I was telling Josh on the drive back yesterday, I was like as soon as I stepped on the field, it's like that game just went off the rails. I'm like kneeling in the end zone, rewriting my story like 3 different times over the next 3 minutes. But yeah, no, that was crazy. I've covered a lot of crazy games. That one is right up there with one of the more insane and improbable finishes. 4 total touchdowns in the final 3 minutes and 18 seconds, 2 of them on defense. It's 2 days later, I'm still struggling to find the right words to describe what happened. But yeah, it was crazy.
Shocking. Start with the offense. Not good, obviously. It's been bad all year, so it's not like any big surprise there. I actually thought the offensive line was fine for the most part. I mean, considering that Michael Tarquin didn't play, so it was a very hodgepodge kind of group that they started in this game. I actually thought it was okay for the most part. They didn't have Javonte Barnes. He didn't make the trip. Gavin Sawchuk was a game-time decision. He made the trip, so it seemed positive he was going to play. I had hearing that he was getting close to playing, and he just never saw the field in this game. So didn't have him either. It was a lot of Taylor Tatum. And then Xavier Robinson late gave them a spark, which it was great, but also was kind of like, where was this earlier? Why didn't they use Xavier Robinson maybe a little earlier in the game?
Yep.
Which they did, but not for an extended period, like in that fourth quarter, kind of chips were down drive, just trying something. They got Jaleel Farouk and Deion Burks back, but didn't really use them. I mean, what was the total targets, Tom? 7 between the two of them?
Yeah. Deion Burks still led the team in receiving.
That's true.
I mean, 7
potential concussion, but
I need more. Especially something down the field a little bit. The 2 Jaleel Farouk targets were nothing. They're like within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. I mean, you got your guys back, and it didn't noticeably make that much of a difference other than a couple of plays where Deion Burks, kind of those safety net routes over the middle. The offense was really bad. And then there's Jackson Arnold, which obviously was a terrible game for him. I mean, Jackson, we've talked about it, has been playing pretty well post-benching. And under John Finley, he's looked a lot more comfortable. He was not good in this game at all. And again, I always feel like I have to say, because when you're talking about quarterbacks, people are so hot and cold. Mm-hmm. This does not mean that Jackson's a bad quarterback or that he has no future. Okay, I want to just get that out there. But he was very poor in this game. I mean, inarguably, watching it back, and you knew it in the moment, but watching it back this morning, he fled the pocket when he didn't need to about a dozen times, including on the game-sealing fumble.
Yep.
Clean pocket. I don't know where he's going. I don't know why he fled the pocket. It led to the fumble, and it obviously they ran it back. That was the game right there. So just not a good game for Jackson. A step backwards. But guys, just in general, offensively, it kind of, again, it is what it is at this point a little bit. We're not covering a lot of new ground. But it's just kind of, this is one of those games where because the offensive line wasn't bad and you got a couple of receivers back, you're kind of left almost wondering, like, why is it still this bad? Like, what are the answers? I don't know if they exist.
Yeah, I mean, the offense was bad. Like, we thought for 2 weeks there was some signs of progress there, that like they were trending in the right direction, and then you just come out and just lay an egg in this game. I do agree that I thought the offensive line played better. I thought it was encouraging, especially on the left side. I thought Heath Ozaida and Logan Allen played pretty well again, which, like, you want to see that sort of development from your redshirt freshmen, the guys that you may be needing to lean on moving forward, depending on how you try to restructure this line again in 2025. Spencer Brown, I think, maybe had his best game of the season. I know he hasn't been used as much,
sure,
but I thought he played pretty well, and I thought the line played well enough for them to win in most spots. But Jackson Arnold's struggling, and I just thought that the game plan didn't really come together well. It's like some questionable calls. Again, like second straight SEC game where you're calling a kind of a gadget play for Bauer Sharp on the edge of the red zone, and you're just like shooting yourselves in the foot. Right there in scoring opportunity. Like, why are you running a jet sweep with this tight end? Just
that
did
was
not
another
work.
one that I didn't love Jackson's read on that play. I didn't mention that before. He makes the wrong read a lot. He should have thrown a pick 6 at one point in this game, which was a terrible read. He got away with it because the guy didn't catch it. But the Bauer Sharp read, not that that's a good play call, I'm not excusing that, but that was also another really poor read. That defender was on that the whole way, and he still let Bauer take it, and it got stuffed.
Yeah, and then Jackson's game overall was just, like you said, holding onto the ball too long sometimes, scrambling out of the pocket when he didn't need to. They only attempted a couple passes downfield, didn't connect on any of them. I don't think there were according to the passer chart. I think there were 2 or 3 passes that were thrown 20+ yards downfield. None between 10 and 20 yards. It was either a couple deep shots, and everything else was either within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. And I know Missouri's got a pretty good pass defense, but you need to do something to put some stress on them, and they just were unable to do that. The 2 longest pass plays of the game were Luke Elzinga's fake punt to Bauer Sharp and Taylor Tatum's touchdown pass to Jackson Arnold. It's like no other pass play went 15 yards or longer. Like, Jackson Arnold's 2 longest completions were 14-yarders to Deion Burks, and one of those resulted in a fumble at the end of the play. That's just not winning football. talk about Jackson that you want as a passer, but protecting the football has been an issue for him. It's been an issue for the quarterback position at large. They've had 9 turnovers between Jackson and Michael Hawkins in their SEC losses. Oklahoma now has the worst turnover margin in SEC play at -9. They've turned the ball over 15 times in 6 games, only committed, or only forced 6 defensively. That's a losing recipe. You're not going to win games when you're giving the ball away that much and so often in, plus territory for opponents. We talked about the fumble at the end, but it just felt like there were too many times where Oklahoma just gave Missouri better field position than it needed. This was a Missouri offense that was struggling for a lot of the game, and you're giving them the ball at midfield, and that's asking for trouble. Like, it was bad.
Yeah, I think Jackson Arnold's decision making was a big factor in this game. And I can't remember if it was the first or second drive that OU got a field goal on, but Deion Burks comes wide open in the end zone on a deep shot pass that could have been completed. But because of the way the offensive line played throughout this season, Jackson Arnold felt like he had to get out of the pocket sooner than he really did. Like the timing, his internal clock is sped up more now because of what's been transpired over the season. I mean, that's just what it is. And Jackson Arnold didn't even see Burks come open because at that point in time, he had tucked the ball and began running, and so it was those type of plays that would be explosive, very fun, confident building touchdown passes that was wide open in the end zone that it just didn't happen. And now you set up for a field goal, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal because it was such a low margin of error late in the game. It's like a touchdown would have been a very big difference here. Like, if we're going to talk about special teams later on, but if Peyton Bowen doesn't muff his punt and Missouri gets a field goal out of it in that first half, it changed a lot of things as well. So like those decision-making aspects of Jackson Arnold's game, and I know, Josh, you talked about it a lot. It wasn't there for him in that game. And that's when OU really needed it. They really needed him to step up. They really needed him to look like a 5-star quarterback. And he just didn't look like it. He didn't look like it, which is why you always end up with, Barra Sharp being the guy trying to make the play. I mean, a jet sweep to Barra Sharp. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, there's no way that should ever happen. There's no way he's the fastest guy on the field at the time. Like, that's not, even if it catches me off guard as a defender, there is nothing. Yeah. I'm just gonna go get him. Like, it's like, oh, okay, because he's not moving that fast to make a difference there. Like, so it's just, man, it was wild because, like you guys said, I thought the pass blocking was well enough for OU to win that game. We've been seeing 9 sack games, 10 sack games, things like that, historical numbers for OU, and they didn't have that in this game. OU's offensive line kept themselves well enough to win that game, and it did not work. Xavier Robinson, I talked about it before. I mean, in the last week's pod, if you're going to use him and you want to retain his red shirt, this is going to be his final game. You're going to have to use him a lot to make it worth it. He comes in early in the game, I think like on the second or third play of the drive, and he's just a pass blocker. That's all they use him for until the second half. They didn't give him the ball, it seemed like. And then he has almost another complete drive of him running over players at the college level. It's like you needed that early on to set, the pace of this game. You needed that. And so it's wild what happened. It's wild. I mean, the offense was just bad. Play calling, I don't necessarily think was all the way there, although, Jackson Arnold just missed some things. And the running backs, you needed Javonte Barnes in this game. I mean, that him not being there was a big blow in the end of it. Just because of the way he ran the ball. It's similar to Xavier Robinson, and they would have trusted him more to do those things early on in the game that they didn't trust Xavier Robinson to do later on. Yeah,
kind of going back to Jackson for a second, it was interesting because the last couple of weeks he's talked so much about, needing to make quick decisions and being efficient with what he's doing in the pocket. And if those quick passes weren't there this week, it looked like he was panicking. Like you said, he didn't let a play develop, missed guys down the field, took off when he didn't need to. It's like you need to be able to process more than just these quick reads. Like you need to like watch the play develop and make something happen sometimes, because those quick reads aren't always going to be there.
Completely agree. The first read wasn't there. It was a flea the pocket, and who knows what you're going to get after that. He fumbled 3 times in this game, which I did want to bring up. They cannot stop fumbling. My God, all year. They're one of the worst teams in college football in just pure fumbles. I don't know what to attribute that to. I'll be totally honest. I don't know because it's not even any one position group. Obviously, Arnold was fumbled a bunch. Deion Burks fumbled in this game. They muffed a punt, like James referred to. Running backs have had fumbles at times. Taylor Tatum. They just cannot stop fumbling. I don't know. That's got to be an emphasis in the offseason, like ball security, 2 hands, something, because they're good for a fumble every quarter right now, it feels like, which is, again, the theme of all this, not winning football. And then to go back to Xavier Robinson, they've completely bungled his redshirt situation. And this has happened a few times as well. Another theme. Like James kind of said, first off, where was he earlier in the year? I know that Javonte Barnes has come on, but like Gavin Sawchuk's been out a lot. They haven't always been running the ball great. Taylor Tatum missed a little bit of time earlier in the year. Like, it looks bad in a way whenever he gets in there, and he looks so great in the little bit of flashes we get, because it's like for the longest time they couldn't run the ball. Like, why didn't we try this guy earlier? And it might have made a difference. And he played, what was it, Tom? Like 2 snaps against Ole Miss and 2 against Texas, or something to that degree. Didn't play, just nothing time. I bet you wish he had those games back right now, because he's played 4 games with 2 to go, and he's your best running back currently available if Javonte Barnes is still out. So that's another just mismanaged situation. And again, that's kind of a theme, which is scary. So I don't know. It's a laundry list of things. You got something else you want to get into?
I was gonna say, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like you have the knowledge of hindsight.
Sure.
You shouldn't have used them because you didn't know that Javonte was gonna hurt his ankle against Maine. You didn't know that Gavin was gonna injure his quad before the South Carolina game. So you can always look back and be like, oh man, shouldn't have gotten these guys a couple snaps here and there. And because I'm sure they were well intentioned and thought that, hey, let's try to plan this out, figure out a time to get him a couple reps here and there. Because looking at that running back room coming into the year, none of us thought Xavier Robinson was going to be any sort of factor. Like,
Sure.
I get that. But like when Javonte gets hurt, when Gavin gets hurt, Taylor Tatum is not ready to be, the number 1 option just yet, it seems. Caleb Hicks completely disappeared. Sam Franklin they've used sporadically. It's like coming into the year, we thought that Xavier Robinson was going to be the 5th, 6th guy in that room right now. So I don't completely fault them for the way that they've managed his snaps. But now you're facing a real, conundrum heading into these final 2 weeks of the season. It's like, do you burn his red shirt and try to see if he can help you win one of these games against Alabama and LSU? Or do you stick to your guns and, does Javonte get healthy? Is Gavin better in a couple of weeks? And like, you think you have enough at that running back position. But from what you've seen from Xavier Robinson these last 2 weeks, you have to think long and hard, but because he's looked really good, especially this past Saturday against an SEC defense. He was running the ball really well late in the game. And you might need that. You might need to burn that red shirt. That's a discussion they need to have with him. They need to have with his family. They need to figure it out. If he's willing to have his red shirt burned, to get an opportunity to get this team bowl eligible.
Yeah, I think it needs to be, at this point, for this coaching staff, it has to be a learning process, because this cannot happen again. Like, it happened last year with Jackson Arnold when you had him coming in and running the bulldozer type of package, just running for a first down, when you absolutely did not need to do that in a game. Like, getting a guy in for 1 to 2 snaps a game, you cannot do that anymore, because well, I guess you have to expect somebody's going to get hurt from now. Like, it just seems to be the case. So you can't have him come in and play 1 or 2 snaps. If you bring a guy in early, he has to get a couple of drives to really make it beneficial for his development, because you won't end up in a situation like this, as you guys have mentioned. Like, this has happened a couple of times now. And so it's going to be something that they really have to look at and say, from now on, we're not doing that. I mean, that I know going into the season, they touted that as one of the things. Like, oh, our freshmen play, this much over the year. Like, it was one of those stats. It was like the best in the nation. Like, some of all the players that got to play. It needs to be beneficial, though. It needs to be a good amount of reps out there. It can't just be going out there and pass blocking here, catch one pass and leave, and that's your whole game. It's not. It can't be that anymore. And so this is going to be the fork in the road for them. They have to figure that out and know not to do this anymore because they just can't expect everybody to be healthy, as we've seen over the last couple of seasons now.
Last thing I'll say on the offense, watch the game back this morning. We were all there in San Antonio last year, the Alamo Bowl against Arizona. They 562 yards in that game. Jackson Arnold threw for over 350. Gavin Sawchuk had over 100 yards. Brennan Thompson had that deep ball. The offensive staff is the same. Jackson Arnold's a year older. The offensive line is turnover, but there were some missing pieces in that bowl game. Opt-outs, I think, right? Because Guyton didn't play in the bowl game. And
Guyton already declared for the draft. Andrew Raymond declared for the draft.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a hodgepodge group.
So it was just Walter Rouse and McCade Matoya were the only regular starters in there. And then you had Troy Everett stepping in at center. Was it Caleb Schaefer at left guard for that game?
Should have looked. Can't remember.
It was. I mean, they had two regular starters in there basically.
Yeah. And again, the offensive line was mostly fine against Missouri. So why is it such a ginormous drop off? That Jackson Arnold that we saw in San Antonio 11 months ago is not the guy we're getting now, which makes no sense. He's much more seasoned than he was then. Is that part of the problem? Now, he was turning it over in that game. We talked about that all offseason, the interceptions, all that. But they could move the ball. He had 362 yards. It is unfathomable that they would throw for 362 yards in a game right now. And again, the receiver room in shambles. We talked about that all year. But they had two other guys back in this game. And Brennan Thompson was one of the guys who was big in the Alamo Bowl. He's been there all year. So it's just puzzling. It's hard to find the where the disconnect is. Again, the offensive staff is the same. All the position coaches are the same. And Seth Luttrell called plays in that game. Obviously, he's no longer here because it was a disaster that everyone knows. Mm-hmm. It's just I'm just looking for what are the answers? Why is it like this? And I just struggle to find them. And that's what makes it scary, I guess, because how's it going to get fixed? You're hoping a magical OC hire can just come in and fix it, basically. Mm-hmm. But there you have it.
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
When you guys saw the final play of the game, I thought I saw this on the broadcast. You had 2 timeouts, correct?
One. They had to
one
blow one on the Burks. Amazingly, not a targeting call. But
okay. Yeah. So Jackson Arnold's running down the field with 2 seconds left on the clock. Sliding and calling a timeout near the 50-yard line is a lot better than.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I thought that in real time. I was like kind of watching the clock because I was standing in the end zone that they were going toward.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as soon as I saw him take off, I was like, he's got to get down. He's got to get down. Yeah. But I guess at some point in there, he thought he didn't have enough time and was just going to have to kind of, make a.
I just think that had to be
half plays, but I agree. I think he should have had the wherewithal and awareness to slide there and get one deep shot at the end zone.
Yeah, that just had to be talked about. I feel like before that play because that's after the Deion Burks hit, right? That was after that play, or was it 2? Yeah. It might have been 2 plays.
2 plays after. I don't know if it was the next play.
Yeah, it might have been 2 plays. But yeah, that's something that has to be talked about. Even if you don't put it all on Jackson Arnold, like some coach has to say that. Like,
yeah, even if it's not talked about in the timeout, you have the in-helmet comms to kind of be like, hey, be aware of the clock.
Exactly.
If you get in this situation, get down.
Get down. We can call a timeout. They did it earlier in the game where Brent Venom was called a timeout with 1 second, after the first down play.
Oh, that was at the end of the first half. That was that was incredible clock management there. I know some people were questioning the earlier timeout he took, I guess the drive before, and then it looked like Missouri was going to be able to go down the field a little bit.
Yeah.
But then at the end, to just manage it perfectly like that and make sure that there was 1 second left on the clock for Zach Schmidt to nail that 56-yarder. I thought that was kind of a masterclass, whereas we've seen other situations where they've mismanaged clock at the end of halves and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that was another one of the cases there.
It's little things.
You can make a Hail Mary. I mean, anything can happen once you throw a Hail Mary up. At the 50-yard line, Jackson Arnold can throw it that far. I'm positive. I've seen it. It's
right.
Throw it up, see what happens.
Yeah, it's little things. They're terrible at the little things and have been. I'll ask one last thing in the offense. I'll ask you guys just because I feel like we should, just because quarterback, still Jackson Arnold, I mean, there's been some thought Michael Hawkins give another look. Casey Thompson, that name's been thrown around a little bit. I mean, it's been so bad. I mean, I think you just stick with Arnold, but what do you guys think? Just real quick.
Yeah, I think you probably stick with Arnold. I don't know if it benefits any of them to make a change. I think it might be a disservice to just keep playing musical chairs. I think you need to evaluate it and assess it over especially over this week. Going into next week, you need to know who it is. But it's above my pay grade. There's a reason that Casey Thompson is not playing right now. Like he's got the veteran ability, but he's coming off an ACL injury. Like that, doing that behind a shaky offensive line is asking for trouble, in my opinion. But I mean, they got to ask themselves some tough questions this week because you got to get to 6 wins somehow, or else, like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting thing right here, because the precedent that has been set is if you turn the ball over 3 times and lose the game, for the quote unquote lose the game for OU, you bring the other quarterback in. That's what's been set. We saw it with Jackson Arnold against Tennessee. We saw it with Hawkins against South Carolina. It happened again 3 times, and you would assume that people say Jackson Arnold lost that game. So that's
he fumbled 3 times, but he recovered the first one.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah. So how do you look at it in this situation? That's it's kind of like, do we go back, because you don't want to keep going back and forth, because then you look very unorganized and not behind a guy and things like that, and the locker room splits because of people arguing over who's who. We've had enough election talk. We don't want to talk about that anymore. Just pick one person and go. You know what I mean? So like. Yeah.
I think you're looking.
Stick with Jackson Arnold. My personal opinion: stick with Jackson Arnold for the rest of the season, and then in the offseason, there is no starting quarterback there's no for sure starting quarterback going into it. It's definitely a battle, of who's going to be it, because there's some things that need to be addressed here. I think you do need a quarterback coach as well. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think you're looking kind of what you're saying. I think you're looking at 2025. I mean, this season's over. So. Casey Thompson's, he's got 2 games left of his career. So you're looking at 2025. That's where the value would come in, letting Jackson get 2 more games of data. And you see from there pretty much. So we'll see. It's the bye week. So I guess we can have a little more time to contemplate that before the next game against Alabama. Defensively, really good for most of it. I mean, it was excellent a lot of the night. I mean, Missouri couldn't do anything. Which was what we thought would be the case when Drew Pine was in there, who's kind of a journeyman, veteran starting quarterback. But they just wilted in the biggest spots, which has been a problem at times this year as well. The 3rd and goal to 13, just horrible. Just a little pass after Theo Weiss. They weren't really even, I mean, also you're trying to score, but that was almost like just trying to make the field goal more manageable, and they scored a touchdown on it. The drive to give up the tie of the game is just completely just unacceptable. I mean, just to let Drew Pine and Missouri go the length of the field in about a minute to tie the game in that spot is just horrible. And again, the defensive holding was a little ticky-tack. You had them in a 3rd and 16, though, and it's like the context, you kind of just don't care whenever but they went 80 yards in a minute with Drew Pine, to tie the game. The Theo Weiss touchdown in the corner was just a really good play. I don't really knock Eli Bowen too much for that. He was right there. It was a great catch, great throw. But, again, really good for most of this game. But when the chips are down and they need it, they've had a hard time getting it. And that's what they'll have to find a way to button up, and just the margins for error are small, in these games, and you have to play excellent the full 4 quarters, and they haven't quite been able to do that. They're really good 90% of the time, but that 10% is burning them, and it did it again on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before, but they had that game won when R. Mason Thomas had that sack of Drew Pine on that last drive. Giving up that 3rd and 13 or 3rd and 16, giving up a 33-yarder in that situation. It's like I know Jacoby Johnson tripped and probably would have been in position to at least make a play on the ball. But to give that up is brutal. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I believe Missouri had the best 3rd down conversion rate that Oklahoma's given up, I think, since the 2022 Texas game, maybe in all of Brent Venables' tenure, but they were 11 of 19, I think it was, on third down. It's like you got to get off the field at some point. You cannot let teams extend drives like that, especially in a 2-minute situation where your defense just won you the game. You go out and then just cough it back up. Like, again, we talked about they can't get out of their own way. They snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. It was, for a team that wants to pride itself on, an elite defense, is what Brent Venables has been trying to build over the last 3 years. And for all the, don't get me wrong, this defense has improved tremendously since he's been here.
Mm-hmm.
But to wilt in that moment was just surprising, disappointing, and frankly inexcusable. Like you said, unacceptable. And that's something that they have to kind of live with now. I know it's tough for guys like Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman, who chose to come back for their senior season and, obviously have not had the season that they thought that this team would have. But it's the situation that they're in now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 33-yard pass to Burton to start the drive was just like, it just killed everything because it happened, such an early play. And so now it's not, you're right there in striking distance after that pass, like near the 50-yard line, and things just changed. The entire play calls changed.
That was Theo Weiss.
Yeah.
Same.
So,
your point
33-yarder?
But it was Theo Weiss. The one that got him out to midfield. Yeah.
Okay.
Burton
yeah.
caught the one to get him inside the 10. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that play there is just, it's rough on its own because that was also, Jacoby Johnson slipped a little bit there on that play as well. It was a slant. It was a basic slant route, and he just slipped and lost leverage, and he got and Weiss got open. So it was rough. It was just rough. That drive in total. Now it's not all on Jacoby Johnson. There was some mishaps here and there, like we talked about with the Woody Washington holding call, which is what it is at this point. Like it was different moments here and there that just they were so small but became so big at the end of that game. It's wild because, like you said, for most of the game, OU's defense was incredible. Like it was at a point to where Missouri didn't look like they trusted Pine to throw the ball down the field. They were running the football. And even Drink went on the you guys in season, but he went on the broadcast when they asked him questions on the sideline and things like that. He was like, "We're just gonna run the ball here. We're gonna really work that. We didn't do a good job of it on the first couple of drives." And that's what they did. They went on and just ran the football. And OU all they had to do was load the box up, and they were getting their stops. And then the second half, it's like they saw something on film or an opening here and there, and they trusted Pine more. And that's where the game changed. He had 3 touchdown passes all in the second half. So it's just they made an adjustment. We've talked about this throughout the year too. OU, when the team makes an adjustment against OU, they need to make one back, and they haven't been doing that. So it was rough. I mean, OU was right there though. They were right there. One or two plays goes their way, and it's an entirely different game. I mean, they walk away bowl eligible with a win, and a lot of hype going into Alabama game in 2 weeks. So there's a lot you can sit with a win, which would have been an incredible one, and it would have been a lot different. But now it's dreary. It's really bad, man.
Story of the season, man.
They just lost Drew Pine with his legs in the fourth quarter multiple times, just scrambling on third and longs. Just can't happen. Just mind numbing to watch. Yeah. Defensively, it's so tough because it's so good for so much of the time. And that fourth down play, which we've referred to a couple times, where Bowman just blows it up. It's like, that's just elite defense. But then, you have moments like that 1 minute drive to tie the game. And a lot of third downs, like Tom said, a lot of third downs given up, third and longs too, to boot. All right. So as we start to kind of wind down, let's do a little look ahead here. State of the program type thing to wrap up. Horrible season, obviously, right? Disaster. 5-5. It took an absolute miracle to win the one SEC game you did. It's going to be hard to win either of these last two. You're going to be big underdogs. No reason to think they're going to win either of these games. Could they? Sure. It's college football. Who knows? But there's no reason to think that they will at this point, right? Terrible season. It took a lot to beat Houston. So I'm not going to just take away 2 wins, but both of your wins over Power 5 teams were kind of fortunate, we'll say. I think it's fair. Awful season. I really don't like talking about coaches' jobs. I just feels weird to do. I'm not a fan of it, but it is part of the gig. Brent Venables got to be feeling it a little bit. Is he the guy to fix this thing? Because it's just off the rails. Two of the worst seasons in modern OU football history have been under Brent Venables in 2 of the last 3 years. It doesn't feel like it's moving in the right direction in a lot of ways. Where are you guys kind of at in just state of the program? Just this season has been a complete disaster, and we'll see what they do in the off season. But hard decisions are going to have to be made soon, because this is just not Oklahoma football as we know it. I mean, 5-5, and again, fortunate to win the one SEC game you did.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't expect a coaching change.
I don't either.
This offseason. I mean, he's got the shield of a shiny contract extension that he got in June.
Quite the buyout on that.
Yeah, close to $45 million. I know it's not all like a lump sum and it comes out over time, but that is a large pill to swallow, especially when you're staring down, having to pay players, basically a salary cap starting next season. That is money that the athletic department has to allot and come up with and try to figure out how to divvy things up. Financially, it's hard to come up with decisions. I think they're going to need to make some smart investments this offseason, both in terms of an offense coordinator hire, maybe a couple other offensive staff shakeups, because I'm sure the coordinator is going to want to bring in a couple guys of his own at some positions, make good NIL investments. Don't just, grab 5 offensive linemen to grab 5 offensive linemen because they've got experience. You're going to have to pony up for top of the market type guys if you want to fix these some of these issues immediately. Pony up for a quarterback if you feel you need to bring in a transfer quarterback and you don't know if Jackson Arnold is the guy moving forward, or if you just need to bring someone in for a competition. But there's going to need to be some financial decisions that this program is going to have to make in the next month. But as far as Brent Venables, he's going to, in my opinion, he's going to have one more year to get this fixed and show signs of progress, try to turn it around next year. We all figured this was going to be a very difficult season just because of what Oklahoma was replacing, what it faced in terms of, the strength of its schedule. None of us expected it to be what it's been this season. None of us thought they'd be 5-5, one SEC win by the skin of their teeth, but we knew it was going to be tough sledding. Brent Venables needs to show that he can get this ship back on course and heading in the right direction. And like we discussed, he's got to make the most important hire of his career now, because whoever he brings as an offensive coordinator, that's what his fate is tied to.
Mm-hmm. I honestly, I don't knock Brent Venables for the first season that he was here. He was left scraps, that disrespect to those players, and it wasn't an ideal situation for him. Mm-hmm. Now he's shown that he knows how to win. He's done it at multiple universities. He's done it with the team last year, where they won 10 wins. They had 10 wins. So he's shown that he knows how to do it. And so because of that, I don't think you move on from him after this poor season, which was very bad for a multitude of reasons. You go into transfer portal in the offseason trying to get offensive linemen because you keep sending people to the draft and you miss on every big offensive line prospect. You come in with that weakness already to an SEC conference that is predicated on the line of scrimmage. You have a multitude of injuries that just changed the entire landscape of how this team plays football. And I just can't imagine that would be Brent Venables, why people would want to fire him. Now, the unpreparedness, the stupid penalties, those type of things will have to be fixed going into next season, because that is something that is on him and they have to figure that out. So I think you give him a year, with a healthy group, with more of his recruits, and see how he develops then, before you can to say it's Brent Venables is the issue here. Because if you fire him, who's out there that's gonna change this program for the better at this point in time. Like, it's just the options aren't necessarily there at the moment to just blow the entire, because that's blowing the entire program up. You've done it with Lincoln Riley already when he left, bringing Brent Venables in. You might have a season like that again if you do it. And so, like, what will be the point at this time? Everybody that talks about Venables, like the recruits, they love the way he recruits. They love his atmosphere, his attitude. They love the way he carries himself and things like that. Keep going with what you have for now. I mean, at least for one more year, I think, and see what happens. Because, like I said, the first year wasn't necessarily on him. You've had 2 years of actual Brent Venables teams. Dabo Swinney had a similar situation. A guy that he coached with. It was pretty bad in that third or fourth year. I can't remember which one it was. It was pretty bad, and then he just rallied to 10 wins for the next 7-8 years, something like that. So just give it time. But this is pretty bad. Like I said, it is a tough time. OU doesn't accept this type of standard, especially on the football program. So we'll see. Yeah,
one of the things that I think also kind of adds another layer to any decisions that would come at the end of this season, again, just kind of like the changing landscape of college football. Like, a lot of athletic departments are still trying to figure out how they're going to manage these next couple of years with that salary cap coming in and stuff like that. And like, we just saw it with Florida last week, where their AD came out and gave a vote of support to Billy Napier, who everybody in the world thought was on the hot seat this season, and whether or not he would do enough to save his job or not remains to be seen. But it's like, you don't want to be that first program that jumps in the water right now. Like, okay, let's be the ones to make the change. Like, no, you want somebody else to go first, like before hopping into that coaching pool. So I just think it's something to consider when you're looking at the big picture of things. But I think he needs one more season to get it right. But like, his future is going to be tied to next season. Like, he's going to enter next season with a pretty warm seat. And like, that's not any of us saying that he needs to be fired or anything, but that is going to be the national perception, is that Brent Venables is going to have to deliver next season and show proof of concept for why he should be the guy to continue to coach Oklahoma in the SEC, because that's what Joe C brought him in for. He thought he was going to be the guy to shepherd this program into the SEC, and now he needs to prove it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it in terms of Brent Venables and things like that, firing him at this point in time is like, back in the day when you fired a head coach, you still had your players. Like, they weren't really going anywhere. The entire group can leave now. Like, you don't want to be doing that and fighting for the scraps once again. You don't want that to happen. So that's one of the big reasons why you want to stick with it. I mean, at least for another year, to see if he can fix things. He's going to have to fix things. It's what it is. And Josh, you pointed it out. The hiring of Seth Luttrell was because you wanted to keep those position coaches, keep the same position coaches. A new offensive coordinator wants to bring his guys in to run things the way he wants to run them. So that's I would assume that's why Brent Venables made that hire to begin with. I don't know, that's the point that you made earlier in the season, Josh. Like, that's what it was, I think. So bring a new offensive coordinator in, let him do what he needs to do to fix things, and you need to handle your situation. Let's see what happens.
For sure. No, I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, when I left the stadium on Saturday night, I was kind of wondering, was that enough to sink Brent Venables? I do think he's back. I think he should be back. He's going to get another shot to get the offensive coordinator hire right. He made a bad hire, and it's burned him big time this year. And he's going to get a shot, though, to get it right. And I think that's probably the right move. There's not really an obvious candidate that makes a ton of sense. I'm sure every fan has let their mind wander just because of where would they go to hire if they did make a head coaching change. There's not a very obvious name to me. And you would also, as you guys both kind of pointed to, you'd be starting totally over. I mean, just totally over, even more so than the last time. Because there was at least that kind of rally the troops kind of mentality after Lincoln left. And there was, the surge in the OU fan support, and it was a very different vibe than at this time, where it's just you're coming off what looks like possibly a 5-7 season. You'd have the absolute opposite of momentum. Whatever the opposite word of momentum is what you would have basically going into next year, starting again completely over. And Brent Venables has built a lot of good things here. He clearly knows how to coach defense, and the culture and all that stuff is moving great. They're recruiting at a high level, but you're going to need to see results eventually. But I do think another year is probably in the cards and probably should be. But it's crazy that it's at least a convo. I mean, we're at least talking about it. So I don't know. Rough year, really bad. Worse than 2 years ago, by far. Again, considering that we're in year 3 and the expectations coming in, and like James said, there's a lot of kind of extenuating factors in 2022. This year, it shouldn't be like this. And so we'll see what happens moving forward. I think that's it. Do you guys have anything else?
We've already run kind of long today.
It was bad. It's been a long. I knew it would be. There's a lot to talk about. We'll be back on Thursday. It's the bye week, obviously, so different schedule. They are going to do some availability on Wednesday. Brent Venables expected to speak after practice, along with some players. So keep an eye out for that on Wednesday evening. We'll see what's to be said there. Basketball coverage continues on as well. Men play tonight, women on Wednesday, and obviously later in the week as well. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be back with the show on Thursday. Colin Kenny will jump in. And James, of course, will be back on the show as well. A little bye week talk on the recruiting end of it. And that'll be right after we talk to Venables on Wednesday. So I'd imagine maybe something from there may be worth bringing up on the Thursday show as well. And we'll be back next week. So enjoy your bye week. Get away from this for a weekend and find a way to finish up in the last 2. That Bama game just announced, we started recording a night game. Did anybody need that? On ABC, like the biggest time slot in the sport. That's a treacherous spot. For you, especially with Alabama's playing right now. So, scary. That's it for now. Back on Thursday. For Tom Green, James D. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway signing off. We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.